What's up, guys? And today we're going to be talking about cross training for rowing. Cross training is literally anything, I guess, that isn't rowing. So, running, cycling, ski erg, swimming. Um, what else is there? I guess those are the main ones. And how you can use that and how you can supplement it into your training so that you can hit your rowing goals while creating a bit of variety, maybe avoiding injury, maybe just creating some some variation to help with keeping things fresh. Maybe it allows you to do some more volume. So we're going to go into kind of the why behind it and how to apply it into your training and what to look out for. But yeah, this has either been a heavily requested video by a few people or requested multiple times by one person, and yeah, we're still at the early days with this channel. So again, if you've got input for videos that you want me to do, I've got loads and loads I can do, but if there's any particular ones you'd like to see, then comment them below. And if you comment it enough like this person has, I'll probably do it. So anyways, so from my journey, I struggled a lot with injury. I had a really bad back injury, and I also had a really bad shoulder injury. Those are the two big ones. So a lot of the time for me was spent on the bike, as well as the odd niggle as well when you have to hop onto it. I also, even when I wasn't injured, I would supplement it into my training quite regularly, and yeah, without having to risk kind of going back into like injury rehab. I think one of the questions is about how different countries use cross training. I think it was Andre Sinek. I think some of the Eastern European teams, I could be wrong, use cross country skiing. That's another big one. I think it might have been Andre Sinek who had a really bad back, and he wouldn't row for like 2 months, I think, in the winter, and just go and do cross country skiing. And he was pretty good. He won the silver medal twice at the Olympics. So it's certainly something 100% you can do. But yeah, we can maybe go into like how you plan it throughout the year. So I think a massively underrated area of rowing training is longer term planning. And the timing of when you peak your rowing volume. So lots of rowing programs just keep it the exact same week to week and just keep pushing people, and it results in burnout and plateauing and fatigue. And that's not just reflected in the amount of volume that they do, but it's the frequency of the rowing. So my first point for cross training would be do it. If you're wanting to do more of it, do it when you're far away from a competition. Do it at the start of the season. It's a good way to start getting some volume into your system without risking injury or risking overtraining. So, say if you're looking at the year like 11 months at a time, I would say certainly the first month you could do it loads. You could do it more than you row, and then those next 2 months you can maybe add it in a bit more frequently. We'll get into like exactly what sort of sessions you should be doing, and should it be high intensity or low intensity, how frequently. We'll get into that in a second. Yeah. So I think it's important for us to understand the strengths behind, or the reasons behind why you cross train, and where it can be helpful and where it cannot. So number one, if you're a rower in a boat, the best way to get better at rowing in a boat is to row in a boat. The only caveat to that would be, can you get into a body of water where you can train consistently, you can consistently keep your heart rate elevated when you're doing low intensity, and can you monitor that as well when you're out in the boat? If that's not the case, say if you're on a bendy river like I was for a point in my rowing journey, I was on the Clyde, which is like 500 meters turn, 500 meters turn, 300 meters turn. It can be a bit harder to get consistent aerobic work in where you just constantly have your heart rate elevated. So if that's the case, I would suggest, the erg's the next best thing. The erg is the best cross training tool for rowing. Yeah, and if you can do a high amount of volume and you can do it consistently and you can enjoy it, then number like absolutely you should be doing all of it on the erg. If you want to go as fast as possible, as you should do as much of it in the boat, and then maybe a bit less, so you should do as much as you can on the erg as well. That like adding in the bike, if you're able to train consistently and avoid injury and stay motivated, adding in the bike doesn't help. It's not like it's challenging your physiology to make you get better. And when I say bike as well, I'll need to be sure that like bike can be anything. Cross training is just the most common one. So anytime I say bike, assume that I mean whatever, like running or swimming, as well. So what happens when you train, basically in your muscles, that you use when you train doing an exercise, the big things that happen are you build mitochondria, which, if anybody remembers high school biology, is the powerhouse of the cell. That really helps with ATP production. And the other big thing that happens is capillary density. So just how efficiently basically you can use your blood. So when you exercise, when you do volume, you're just constantly adding mitochondria and capillary density to those muscles. So when you row, you build them in your quads, in your glutes, in your core, in your back, and in your arms. That's the main benefit of that. That's what happens on a molecular level when you do this sort of training. In your heart and in your lungs, you're increasing your breathing efficiency in your lungs. You're increasing the amount of blood that you can pump in sort of one contraction, and you're increasing your overall the amount of blood that your heart can pump basically when you do any sort of aerobic exercise. So that's true for any form of cross training or any form of rowing. So this is where the first drawback happens, is that if you do, say, if you do lots and lots and lots of cycling, for example, or lots and lots of running, you build the mitochondria and the capillary density in your legs, but to a much lesser extent in your core and in your back and in your arms. So that's the first thing to note, is that's where the drawback is. Let's go into the specifics now about how you should actually like apply this and when you should start to think about cross training. So number one, if you feel like you're at a limit with how much you're willing to row and erg, but you getting on the bike or going for a run is going to allow you to do more training, or it's easier for you to do more training if you don't have an erg at home and you're able to get a bit of extra training in by getting your shoes on and going for a run, which is why I love running so much, because it's so easy to just shoes, run. Or you've got a bike, or there's a bike in your home gym or the club that's nearby or something like that. Doing that allows you to get more volume in, then do it. You're still, when you cycle or when you cross train or when you do some of these other exercises, you're still going to be building the mitochondria, the capillary density in your legs, and you're also going to be increasing your heart and your lung strength. So yeah, you should definitely do it. Basically what my point is with cross training, if it allows you to do more volume, you should do it. If it means you're sacrificing volume that you could be spent rowing, then don't do it. This kind of will get on to my next point, which will be if you're injured. Or if you've got a niggle, then yes, definitely. If you feel like a bit of a niggle or an injury starting to creep in, you should cross train. Pretty much, yeah, as simple as that. When it comes to the actual breakdown of how you should split your training, the priority generally is to do high intensity for on the rowing machine or in the boat. If you're going to supplement your cross training, then the best way to do that is through the low intensity training. So, don't if you're going to swap one session, don't, like, say you've got 3x2K on the program, don't try and do that on the bike. I would try and think, right, maybe I can swap in some of my lower intensity stuff. I think generally, and what we'll do with our athletes as well, especially when they're far away from a competition or if they're just looking for variety, I think you realistically can have very good progress by cross-training once a week. So if you're someone training 4 to 6 times a week, I think as long as you're not close to a competition, then spending one of those sessions when you go for a run or a bike, I think that's a very sustainable approach to a training program. And I think that, yeah, it just keeps a bit of variety. And like, look, if you having that variety where you're not constantly doing the same thing, allows you to train longer and more consistently, then do it. But again, just going back to like, if you want to prioritize, I guess it comes down to priorities. But if you want to get better at rowing, do more rowing. So let's go now to if you're fully injured or if you're entirely away from you can't do any rowing at the time, or you're maybe wanting to go through a full-on cycling phase. Ideally, if you're gonna do replace the volume that you're doing on the erg or in the boat with, say, a bike, then I would try and do 4 low intensity to make up for the fact that you're not building mitochondria and capillary density in your core, in your back, and in your arms. I'd probably do about 1.25 to 1.5 times the amount of total distance. So if you have a 40-minute erg, times that roughly by 1.25 into a 50-minute bike, as a way to kind of compensate for the fact that it's less than ideal. The only time I wouldn't multiply it like this, like that's fine for cross-country skiing, for cycling, for ski erging, for swimming. The only time I wouldn't do that is for running, just because us as rowers, like, it's so high impact. And obviously if you start doing 1.5 times the amount of rowing mileage you do when you go running, then you're going to hurt yourself. So don't do that. With running, I would just keep it the same, 1 for 1. So that's the first thing if you're fully cross-training, is do more low intensity volume. And then when you go to do your high intensity, pretty simple, just do the exact same time that you would on the erg into the boat. And stroke rates, we've played around with that before and tried to, if you've got a rate step and you try and increase the RPM on the bike, it doesn't work. There's no point in doing that. You're losing the effect that you want from the low rate stuff in the boat. Just scrap it and go full on. So say you had 3x2K and the 2K takes you roughly 8 minutes each. Do 3x8 minutes as hard as you can go. This is an extreme example of how I transitioned back from rowing when I was trying to get into the GB team, how I transitioned from that into hitting a good 5K score 6 weeks later. So I really badly hurt. I had a nerve impingement on my shoulder and really damaged it. I was out of the boat for about 3 months, and it was kind of the big year for like trials to get into the GB team. I did a shitload of volume on the bike. I mean, I was taking it to the extreme. I was just doing, the other good thing about the bike is, you're far lower risk of injury. I was doing, on average, probably at least for a session, 2 hours per session on the bike. I'd sometimes do that, maybe if it was a low intensity day, I would do 2 hours in the morning and then an hour to an hour and a half in the evening. Some days I would just do 4 hours straight on the bike. So that's extreme. That's much closer to what like pro cyclists and stuff do for their training. Not pro, but just like maybe, competitive cyclists would do. I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you're full time and you're getting paid to row. I mean, generally like the intensity work we would do some benchmarking as well. That's probably a good thing. A good tip actually is to do a 6-minute max test. I think for a 6-minute max test I did 530 watts. And then for the 30-minute max test on the bike, the GB standard for the 30-minute, I can't remember what it is for the 6-minute. I think for the 6-minute it's 500 watts. For a 30-minute effort on the bike, bike for heavyweight men. Again, I don't know what lightweight men or the women's ones are, unfortunately, but I know for the heavyweight men that they want you around 400 watts for 30 minutes. So that was the kind of benchmark. So, yeah, gives you a good target to track towards. With heart rate, so when you're doing, this is mainly just me talking about the bike. So if you're looking for running or cross-country skiing advice, I'm sorry, this is mainly just through my experience, what we find most other rowers do. With low intensity on the bike, it's harder to get your heart rate up. It's fine to sit 5 to 8 beats lower than you would normally. When we did lactate testing, for me to sit at the same heart rate on the erg as I do on the erg or in the boat, to sit at the same lactate level. So I was like a 1.5 minimals. For me to get 1.5 minimals on the bike, which is the most accurate reading, by the way, I would sit around like a 125 or 130 heart rate. To get 1.5 on the erg, I was much closer to like 138, 145. So just know that you're still hitting your zones when you sit at a lower heart rate on the bike. Yeah, I mean, when I came out of that phase, I within 6 weeks, like it still took me kind of 3 weeks of building through UT2, and my splits were pretty slow at the start, and that's normal. It's never going to be a smooth transition, but the important thing is I had that endurance there in my heart and lungs, and I had it in my legs as well. It was just the core that needed some catching up with, and yeah, within 6 weeks I hit I wasn't that far off my 5K PB. I was like 5 seconds off my 5K PB, having 6 weeks earlier, just being purely on the bike. So that was a good result. Get into the, I guess, kind of like the last tips here I would give is, if you're spending more time cross training, I'd make sure that you smash your core on land. Like, core is number one. Most important muscle group, I think, for good rowing. So hit your core. Normally, if you're on the bike, it's because your back is injured, normally for rowers, or normally if you're running, it's because your back's injured. If you can still build strength in your back, that will be really good to keep that priority there. So hyperextensions, straight leg deadlifts, hip thrusts. If you can hit that posterior chain, hit that a lot without risking injury, assuming that's why you're doing more cross training, then I would make sure you do that as well, and hit your core, and then a little bit of arms work and lats work. If you can, so long story short, let's summarize this here. Rowing is the best thing for rowing. If you can row more, great. If you cross training once or twice a week allows you to do more volume, then great, do that 100%. But don't start to prioritize that or go to that just because you prefer it more all the time if you're looking to prioritize performance. And that's where, again, I can't really chime in here and tell you what you should prioritize. That's your decision. Bear in mind, creating a bit of variety, especially when you're far away from a competition. If it allows you to train consistently long term, that's fantastic. With an injury, try and do more volume than you would on the erg or in the boat when you're cross training, and just make your high intensity stuff the exact same. That's basically it. Make sure you hit your core, make sure you hit your posterior chain as well. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you want me to go deeper on kind of any of these areas that I talked about, let me know and I can make another video. But like and subscribe, and wishing you all the best.